I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped being the safety net. And when the floor disappeared beneath him, gravity did the rest. They always underestimate the person holding the invisible strings. My name is Sadie Malcolm, and for 6 years I was the Senior Compliance Analyst at Civil Technologies, a mid-sized infrastructure consulting firm that billed itself as pioneering sustainable urban development. What that actually meant was we helped cities navigate the labyrinth of environmental regulations, zoning laws, and federal grant requirements so they could build things without getting sued or losing funding. Exciting stuff, right? But here's the thing about boring work, it's only boring until someone stops doing it correctly. I was 34, chronically exhausted, and the owner of a truly impressive collection of reading glasses I kept losing in different conference rooms. My apartment smelled like cold brew coffee and the lavender candles I lit to convince myself I had work-life balance. I didn't. My kitchen counter was a graveyard of takeout containers because cooking for one after a 12-hour day felt like negotiating another contract I didn't have energy for. The office occupied the 11th floor of a glass tower downtown, all exposed ductwork and industrial chic that made everything echo. The sales team had the windowed side, where natural light pooled on their ergonomic standing desks and motivational posters about crushing quotas. We had the fluorescent interior, where the air tasted recycled and the carpet absorbed both sound and hope. My desk faced a wall covered in checklists, compliance calendars, and color-coded spreadsheets that tracked every submission deadline for every active project across 4 states. The break room coffee was somewhere between motor oil and punishment. The printer jammed every 3rd Tuesday like clockwork. The women's bathroom on our floor had a mysterious leak that facilities had been looking into for 8 months. These were the small indignities that accumulate when you work somewhere long enough that you stop noticing them. I'd started as a junior analyst right out of grad school, back when the company had 20 employees and operated out of a renovated warehouse that still smelled faintly of the artisanal pickle company that had occupied it before us. I'd built the entire compliance framework from scratch, the templates, the review protocols, the audit trails, the color coding system that everyone now used without knowing I'd invented it. I knew every quirk of every regulatory body we dealt with. I could tell you which EPA regional office processed applications fastest, which state agencies required original signatures versus digital, and exactly how many days before a deadline you needed to submit to account for processing delays and the inevitable additional information requested emails. And I was very, very good at catching mistakes before they became expensive problems. The founders had appreciated that once. Back when it was still a small operation and everyone could see the direct line between my work and a company staying solvent. But companies change when they grow. The original founders had sold majority stake to a private equity firm 2 years ago, and suddenly everything was about scaling and optimization and other words that sound impressive in boardrooms but translate to do more with less and stop complaining. 6 months ago, the company brought in a new director of operations named Gavin Pierce. Gavin was 42, had an MBA from a school he mentioned within 5 minutes of meeting anyone, and wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. He'd come from a tech startup that had recently imploded, though he described it as exiting after a successful pivot. His hair was always gelled into submission, and he had this habit of clicking his pen during meetings like he was keeping time to music only he could hear. Gavin's entire philosophy could be summed up as move fast and let someone else clean up the wreckage. He loved talking about agility and disruption and not letting perfectionism become the enemy of progress. In his first all-hands meeting, he actually said, "We need to stop being so risk-averse and start acting like the innovators we claim to be." I remember thinking, we're not building apps. We're making sure bridges don't collapse and water treatment plants meet safety standards. There's a reason we're risk-averse. But I kept my mouth shut. I'd learned over the years that executives don't want to hear why their brilliant ideas won't work. They want you to smile, nod, and then quietly fix things behind the scenes so they can take credit when everything goes smoothly. For 6 years, I'd done exactly that. The company had grown to 70 employees. We had contracts with 8 major municipalities, 3 state agencies, and 2 federal grant programs. We were in the middle of bidding on a massive infrastructure project in partnership with the Department of Transportation, a $90 million contract that would triple our revenue if we won it. The preliminary proposal was due in 3 weeks, and the final submission 2 weeks after that. Gavin had been circling my department like a hawk eyeing a field mouse. He kept asking why compliance reviews took so long, why we needed so many checkpoints, why we couldn't just trust people to do their jobs without micromanaging, He'd started attending our team meetings uninvited, interrupting technical discussions to ask if we'd considered streamlining the workflow. I'd explained, patiently, that compliance wasn't micromanaging. It was making sure every document met the specific requirements of the agency reviewing it, that every calculation was defensible, that every signature was from someone with the proper authorization. Miss one requirement and the entire application gets rejected. In some cases, you can't resubmit until the next funding cycle, which might be a year away. Sounds like we need to hire faster people, he'd said, smiling like he'd solved world hunger. It's not about speed, I'd replied, keeping my voice level. It's about accuracy. The EPA doesn't care how fast you submitted if you forgot to include the Phase 2 environmental assessment. He'd waved that away. Details. We'll figure it out. Details. As if my entire job wasn't built on details. I should have seen it coming. It was a Thursday morning, early March. I arrived at 7:30 like always, carrying my third coffee of the day and mentally reviewing the checklist for the DOT proposal. We were in good shape, ahead of schedule, actually, which never happened. I'd spent the previous week personally reviewing every subsection, flagging inconsistencies, and coordinating with the engineering team to make sure their technical specifications matched the regulatory language. I'd caught 3 potential showstoppers: a miscalculated load capacity in Section 4B, an outdated certification reference in the environmental impact statement, and a signature block that referenced the wrong corporate entity. Small things. The kind of small things that sink proposals. Gavin was waiting at my desk. "Morning, Sadie." His voice had that forced enthusiasm people use when they're about to tell you something you won't like. "Got a minute?" I set down my coffee. "Sure." "Great. So, I've been doing some strategic thinking about resource allocation." He perched on the edge of my desk, knocking over my carefully organized stack of permits. "I'm implementing some changes to improve efficiency." My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever follows the phrase strategic thinking about resource allocation. "I'm redistributing your workload," he continued, pulling out his tablet. "You've been carrying too much, and frankly, I think you're bottlenecking progress by insisting on reviewing everything personally. We hired talented people. Time to let them shine." "Redistributing to whom?" "I'm bringing in Fiona Ashcroft from the marketing team to take over day-to-day compliance operations. She's eager to expand her skill set, and she's got great energy. You'll shift to a more strategic advisory role, high-level guidance, mentoring, that sort of thing." I blinked. Fiona has a degree in communications. She's never done compliance work. Exactly. Fresh perspective. She won't be bogged down by old habits. He smiled like he'd just offered me a promotion. "You care too much about details, Sadie. It's admirable, but it's slowing us down. Time to trust the process." The absurdity of it hit me like cold water. Trust the process? I was the process. "The DOT proposal is due in 3 weeks, I said slowly. Every section has specific formatting and content requirements. The technical review alone requires someone who understands both the engineering specifications and the regulatory framework. If we miss even one, Fiona will handle it. I have complete confidence." He stood, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "This is effective immediately. Can you spend today bringing her up to speed?" "Thanks." He walked away before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my desk, at the spreadsheets and calendars and checklists that represented 6 years of meticulous work. My hands were shaking. Not from anger yet, that would come later. From the disorienting sensation of having the ground vanish beneath my feet. Around me, the office hummed with its usual morning energy. The sales team was already on calls, voices rising and falling in practiced enthusiasm. Someone had burned popcorn in the microwave again. The fluorescent light above my desk flickered, the same irregular pattern it had maintained for 3 months despite 2 maintenance requests. Everything was normal except the part where my entire professional identity had just been erased. Fiona arrived 20 minutes later, looking nervous. She was 26, enthusiastic, and completely unequipped for what was about to be dumped on her. She wore a floral dress and carried a notebook with motivational quotes on the cover. I didn't blame her. She hadn't asked for this. "Hey," she said tentatively. "So, Gavin said you'd show me the ropes? I spent the entire day trying to compress 6 years of institutional knowledge into 8 hours. I showed her the master project tracker, the compliance calendar, the database of regulatory requirements organized by agency and jurisdiction. I explained submission protocols, review cycles, the 17 different places you had to check to make sure a single form was filled out correctly. I walked her through the DOT proposal structure, how the executive summary had to mirror but not duplicate the project overview, how the technical specifications needed to reference specific sections of federal standards by exact citation number, how the budget justification required a particular format that wasn't explicitly stated in the RFP but would absolutely get you rejected if you got it wrong. She took notes. She asked good questions. But I could see the panic building behind her eyes as she realized exactly how much she didn't know. This is a lot, she said finally, around hour 6. It is, I agreed. It takes years to develop the pattern recognition. You start to see where mistakes happen before they happen. You learn which agencies are sticklers for format versus content, which reviewers will call you for clarification versus just rejecting outright. Gavin said it was pretty straightforward. Of course he did. Look, I said, you can call me. If you hit something you're not sure about, just reach out. I don't mind helping. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. I was so worried you'd be angry about this. I'm not angry at you. That was true. My anger had a very specific target, and it wasn't the 26-year-old who'd just been thrown into deep water without a life vest. By Friday afternoon, I'd been moved to a desk in the back corner, away from the project teams. My new role, according to the org chart Gavin distributed via email, was Strategic Compliance Advisor. Which meant exactly nothing. I had no direct reports, no projects assigned, no access to the shared drives where the actual work lived. Someone from IT had already downgraded my system permissions. The email announcing the reorganization was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. As part of our ongoing commitment to professional development and operational excellence, we're excited to announce Sadie Malcolm's transition to a strategic advisory role, where her deep expertise will benefit the entire organization. Fiona Ashcroft will assume operational leadership of the compliance function, bringing fresh energy and innovative thinking to our processes. Translation: we're sidelining the person who actually knows what she's doing and replacing her with someone cheaper who won't push back. I'd been promoted into irrelevance. The DOT proposal was now Fiona's problem. Along with 3 other active submissions, 2 ongoing audits, and the routine compliance monitoring for all existing contracts. The workload that had required my full attention plus frequent overtime was now the responsibility of someone who'd learned what an EIS was approximately 36 hours ago. I went home that night and sat in the dark for 2 hours, drinking wine I didn't taste and staring at the city lights through my apartment window. My phone sat silent on the coffee table. Usually by this time on a Friday I'd have gotten at least 3 calls about some minor crisis that needed handling before Monday. The silence felt like rejection and relief in equal measure. Monday morning, my phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. It was Fiona. Sadie? Sorry to bother you so early. I can't find the certification documents for the environmental impact assessment. Gavin said we need to include them in the DOT proposal, but I don't see them in the folder you showed me. I rubbed my eyes, fumbling for my glasses in the dark. They're not in that folder. They have to be maintained in a separate database because they have different retention requirements under federal records law. I'll send you the link. Thanks. Also, the engineering team is saying the technical specs don't match the format requirements? I thought we were good on that. A cold feeling settled in my chest. We were. Did someone edit them? Gavin asked them to make the language more dynamic. He said the original version was too dry and wouldn't excite the review panel. I closed my eyes. More dynamic wasn't a regulatory concept. Federal reviewers don't want excitement. They want precision, clarity, and exact compliance with stated requirements. I'll come in early and take a look. You're the best. I don't know how you kept track of all this. I got to the office at 7. The technical specifications had indeed been rewritten. They now sounded impressive and meant absolutely nothing. Worse, they no longer aligned with the specific technical parameters the DOT had requested in Section 3.2.4 of the RFP. The proposal would be rejected on page 12, probably within the first automated screening pass. Someone had replaced load-bearing capacity of 850 metric tons per structural node with robust load management exceeding industry standards. That would get you exactly nowhere with a Federal Engineering Review Board. I fixed it. Then I fixed 3 other sections where similar improvements had been made. The budget narrative had been simplified in ways that removed required cost justification elements. The project timeline had been reformatted into a sleek infographic that was completely illegible to the database system agencies use to process proposals. The environmental compliance section now made claims we couldn't actually substantiate with the included documentation. I sent the corrected versions to Fiona with detailed notes explaining why each change was necessary and which specific RFP requirements they addressed. She thanked me profusely. Gavin sent me an email at 9:15, "Please remember you're in an advisory role now, not an execution role. Let the team own their work." Tuesday, Fiona called me 4 times. Wednesday, 6 times. Each time, it was something critical that had been missed or misunderstood. A signature from someone without proper authorization. A reference to outdated regulatory standards. A missing attachment that was explicitly required on page 47 of the RFP. Each time, I fixed it. By Wednesday afternoon, I'd effectively done my old job while officially not doing my old job. The difference was that now I was doing it reactively, fixing problems after they'd already been created, instead of preventing them in the first place. It was exhausting. And unsustainable. And exactly what Gavin had said he didn't want. Thursday morning, Gavin stopped by my desk. The clicking pen was out. "Sadie, we need to talk about boundaries. Fiona needs space to learn. You hovering isn't helping her develop confidence. She's asking for help because she's about to submit documents that will tank a $90 million proposal. That's catastrophizing. Have a little faith." He smiled. "You're not the only person capable of doing this work. If we treated you like you were indispensable, we'd never build organizational resilience." The corporate buzzword salad was particularly thick today. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the expensive suit and the self-satisfied smirk and the complete, blissful ignorance of how badly he'd just screwed up. At the confidence of someone who'd never experienced the consequences of being wrong because there was always someone else cleaning up behind him. And something clicked. 6 years. 6 years I'd worked late nights and weekends. 6 years I'd caught other people's mistakes, prevented disasters, made executives look competent. I'd missed my sister's wedding rehearsal for a grant deadline. I'd worked through pneumonia during an audit. I'd canceled vacation 3 times in 2 years because nobody else could handle it. And this was what it got me. Sidelined. Dismissed. Told I cared too much. "Fine. You're absolutely right," I said. "I'll step back." His smile widened. "Fantastic. I knew you'd be a team player about this." I stopped answering Fiona's calls. I stopped checking the shared drives. I didn't review drafts or offer suggestions. When people asked me questions in the hallway, I smiled and said, "You'll need to talk to Fiona. She owns compliance now." The first day was hard. My phone buzzed constantly. I watched the notifications pile up, each one probably representing some small disaster I could fix in 5 minutes. My fingers itched to respond. I didn't. The second day was easier. The calls decreased. Either they were figuring things out, or they'd stopped asking. I spent my work hours reading industry news and updating my LinkedIn profile. By the third day, I felt like I was holding my breath underwater. Waiting for something to break. Knowing it would break. Unable to do anything about it except watch. It felt like standing on train tracks, watching the light grow brighter, while everyone around you insists there's no train. Friday afternoon, 2 days before the DOT proposal was due, Gavin's office door flew open so hard it bounced off the wall. His face was the color of a burst blood vessel. "Sadie." "My office." "Now." Everyone in the open floor plan went silent. Keyboards stopped clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the HVAC seemed to pause. 70 pairs of eyes watched me stand and walk toward his office. I walked slowly. Taking my time. Part of me was curious about exactly how bad it was. He was pacing behind his desk when I entered, tablet in hand, looking like he wanted to throw it through the floor-to-ceiling window behind him. Why, he hissed, are there mistakes everywhere? I blinked. I'm sorry? The DOT proposal. I just reviewed the final draft before submission. It's a disaster. Formatting is completely wrong, half the required attachments are missing, the technical specs contradict the project timeline, the budget section doesn't add up. He slammed the tablet down. How did you let this happen? I didn't work on the DOT proposal. You reassigned that to Fiona, remember? You were supposed to be advising. You told me to stop hovering. To let the team own their work. You sent me an email specifically instructing me to step back and not interfere with execution. His jaw worked. You did this on purpose. The accusation hung in the air between us. I did exactly what you asked me to do, I said quietly. I stepped back. I let other people handle compliance. This is what it looks like when I'm not catching the mistakes. This is sabotage. No. Sabotage would be if I'd actively broken something. I just stopped fixing everything before it broke. I paused. You said I wasn't indispensable. You said we needed organizational resilience. Turns out you were wrong on both counts. His face went from red to purple. You're done. Security will escort you out. Pack your desk. I felt oddly calm. Detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. You're firing me for following your direct instructions? I'm firing you for gross negligence and insubordination. And if this proposal gets rejected, I will personally ensure you never work in this industry again. He jabbed a finger toward the door. Out. Now. I nodded. Walked to my desk. The office was still silent, but now people were openly staring. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked terrified that they might be next. I packed my things into a cardboard box. 6 years fit into one box. Funny how that works. A handful of personal photos. The fancy pen set my team had given me for my 5th anniversary. 3 sweaters I'd kept in my desk drawer for the aggressive air conditioning. My collection of mismatched mugs. The security guard, an older guy named Russell who'd always been kind to me, who remembered how I took my coffee and asked about my mother's health, walked me to the elevator. He looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, he muttered. Not your fault. For what it's worth, everyone knows you kept this place running. Apparently not everyone. In the elevator, alone, I realized I wasn't crying. Wasn't angry. Just tired. Bone-deep tired. And underneath that, something else. Something cold and crystalline and very, very clear. I got home. Made tea I didn't drink. Sat on my couch and stared at the wall for maybe an hour, my mind oddly blank. Then I opened my laptop. Here's the thing about compliance work, it's invisible when it's done right. You're the person who makes sure all the passwords are updated, all the certifications are current, all the authorizations are in place. You're the one who knows which systems depend on which other systems, who maintains the master lists, who holds the institutional knowledge that keeps everything running. And when you leave, all of that goes with you. I hadn't sabotaged anything. But I also hadn't done what I normally did when leaving a job, create comprehensive handoff documentation, train my replacement, build redundancy into critical systems. Why would I? I'd been escorted out by security with zero notice. The DOT proposal required something most people don't think about, authorized signatory status. Every document submitted to a federal agency needs to be signed by someone the agency has on file as an authorized representative of the company. It's a security and accountability thing. Prevents fraud. Prevents random people from submitting applications in a company's name. I'd been Civil Technology's primary authorized signatory for 4 years. I'd handled all the paperwork, renewals, and updates with the various federal agencies we worked with. It was one of those boring administrative tasks that nobody else wanted to think about, the kind of thing that takes 3 hours of form filling and 2 months of processing time and then sits in a file somewhere being important but invisible. When I checked the DOT's authorization database, publicly searchable, completely legal, information that anyone could access, I saw that my name was still listed as the primary contact. Because I'd been the one who updated it. And I'd been planning to add Fiona's name after properly training her, walking her through the registration process, making sure she understood the renewal schedule. But that hadn't happened. which meant that if the proposal was submitted with anyone else's signature, it would be automatically flagged as unauthorized and rejected without review. The system wouldn't even let a human look at it. I sat back, stared at my screen. I could call them, could explain the situation, could spend 3 hours on hold navigating the federal bureaucracy to get emergency authorization transferred, could save the proposal, could rescue the person who'd just fired me, the person who'd told me I cared too much, who'd dismissed my warnings, who'd threatened to destroy my career. I closed my laptop. Saturday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Sadie, it's Fiona. Please call me back. There's an issue with the signatory authorization and Gavin is freaking out. We need to submit by Monday and nobody knows how to fix this. Please. The desperation in her voice made me feel guilty for approximately 30 seconds. Then I remembered that I'd spent an entire day trying to teach her the basics, had offered to help, and had been explicitly ordered to stop interfering. I deleted the voicemail. 3 more calls on Saturday. 5 on Sunday. I blocked the numbers. I spent the weekend in sweatpants, eating ice cream and watching cooking shows where everything turned out perfectly and nobody got fired for being too competent. My apartment felt different somehow. Quieter. Like the background hum of anxiety I'd been carrying for 6 years had finally shut off. Sunday evening, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize but didn't block. Something told me to answer. Ms. Malcolm? This is Helen Brandt, General Counsel for Civil Technologies. I apologize for calling your personal number on a weekend, but we have an urgent situation. Her voice was professional, controlled, with just the faintest edge of stress underneath. I said nothing. We understand you were the primary authorized signatory for federal submissions. We need to submit the Department of Transportation proposal tomorrow, and we've discovered there's an authorization issue. We need your assistance in resolving this. I was terminated on Friday, I said calmly. For gross negligence and insubordination. Mr. Pierce said he'd ensure I never worked in this industry again. A pause. I was not aware of the specifics. Ms. Malcolm, I understand this is an awkward situation, but this contract represents a significant opportunity for the company. If we could compensate you for your time. No. I'm sorry? No. I won't help. Gavin told me I wasn't the only person capable of doing this work. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Ms. Malcolm, please be reasonable. We're talking about $90 million. Jobs depend on this contract. The company's future depends on it. Then maybe the company should have thought about that before firing the person who understood how federal contracting works. I kept my voice pleasant. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm just no longer your employee. You don't get to fire me on Friday and demand my help on Sunday. We could discuss reinstatement. No. Firmer this time. You've made it very clear how little you value my work. I believe you. Have a good evening, Ms. Brandt. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something that felt uncomfortably close to power. Monday morning, I slept until 9. Made actual breakfast, eggs, toast, fresh coffee from the good beans I never had time to use on workday mornings. Went for a walk in the park near my apartment, something I hadn't done on a weekday in 6 years. The world looked different at this hour. Parents with strollers. Retirees feeding pigeons. People whose lives weren't ruled by compliance deadlines. When I got home, I checked my email. There were 14 messages from various people at Civil Technologies, ranging from pleading to threatening. Gavin's was my favorite. Your refusal to assist is a clear violation of professional ethics and possibly illegal. Our attorneys are reviewing options. I forwarded the entire thread to my personal attorney. Yes, I'd retained one over the weekend, because I'm not stupid, along with documentation of my termination, Gavin's threats to blacklist me, and the emails where he'd explicitly told me to stop working on compliance matters. She responded within an hour, they have no legal standing. Don't engage. Document everything. And call me if they escalate. We may have grounds for a defamation suit if he follows through on that blacklisting threat. I didn't have to wait long to see what happened. By Tuesday, LinkedIn was lighting up. The DOT proposal had been submitted on time but flagged immediately for authorization irregularities. According to someone who still worked there and messaged me anonymously, Gavin had tried to submit it with his own signature, despite never having registered as an authorized signatory. The system had auto-rejected it before any human reviewer even saw it. The proposal was dead in the water. $90 million, gone. But the real damage was just starting. Wednesday morning, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer. Sadie Malcolm? The voice was crisp, professional, female. Speaking. My name is Margaret Chin. I'm the VP of Operations for Cascade Infrastructure Group. We're a competitor of Civil Technologies, and we've been following this situation with interest. Your name has come up repeatedly in our industry circles as someone who actually knows what she's doing. I'd like to discuss a position with our compliance department. Are you available for a conversation? I smiled for the first time in a week. I am. We talked for an hour. She knew exactly what had happened. The industry is small, people talk, and she wasn't interested in dancing around it. We've been wanting to expand into federal contracts, she said. But we don't have the internal expertise. We need someone who knows the landscape. Someone meticulous. Someone who won't cut corners. Someone who cares too much about details? I asked. She laughed. Exactly that person. We heard about the DOT situation. That you warned them and got silenced. That tells me you know what you're doing, and that you have integrity. Both are rare. We discussed salary, 20% more than my old role. Benefits. 3 direct reports. Actual authority to say no when timelines were unrealistic. She offered me the job before we hung up. I want someone who tells me when we're about to do something stupid, she said. Especially if I don't want to hear it. That's literally what got me fired. Perfect. Welcome to Cascade. 2 weeks later, I started. 2 weeks after that, Civil Technologies imploded. The rejected DOT proposal triggered a full contract review. Auditors arrived. Real ones. Without anyone who understood compliance reviewing responses, errors multiplied, missed renewals, invalid signatures, incomplete audit replies. Contracts were suspended. Clients complained. The board opened an investigation. Gavin was fired 6 weeks after me. He tried to blame it on sabotage, but the timeline betrayed him. Every failure happened after my termination. The email trail showed him blocking my work, then firing me for it. The board wasn't amused. They hired 3 people to replace me. They're still struggling. Institutional knowledge doesn't transfer cleanly. At Cascade, I'm listened to. Risks are respected. Timelines are real. We've won a $40 million DOE contract and made the EPA shortlist. My compliance framework cited both times for exceptional regulatory detail. I framed that sentence on my desk. Sent a copy to the CEO who once signed my termination. No note. Here's the lesson: competence only has value where it's respected. Some people won't notice the work that prevents disasters until it stops. You're not obligated to save people who threw you overboard. I didn't destroy Civil Technologies. I just stopped holding a failing system together. That's not sabotage. That's gravity. And gravity always wins.